and northern England through the night. Drier and clearer further south, but enough of a breeze to prevent a frost, and then a bright day on Wednesday in the south, whilst northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland sees persistent rain at times. And in the far north of Scotland, after that very windy start to the day, the winds do ease and the showers become fewer and further between. Some sunshine reappearing. Cloudier skies for all of us on Thursday and Friday, but milder.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it was supposed to be the big day for the NHS for our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, but of course everything's been dominated by Nadhim Zahawi. The PM says he's acted decisively. We'll debate tonight, has he actually got a grip? We show an exclusive interview with the boss of Quadrilla. He may well sue the government over its U-turn on fracking policy in the north of England. And joining me on Talking Pints, the man behind the English cult classic Rise of the Foot Soldier, Andrew Loveday, joins me on Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight, firefighters and control room staff have voted for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigades Union said its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. And teachers have today vowed to go on strike in England and Wales on Wednesday after last-minute talks between the unions and the government failed. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Union leaders say there's no offer from the Education Secretary on trying to bridge the gap between them and the government, and that the government has squandered an opportunity to avoid strike action. But Gillian Keegan says it was a constructive meeting.
We've been quite engaged over a long period of time, and clearly it's difficult because we want to halve inflation and they want to have rises that will fuel inflation. But we are having constructive discussions about future pay, about workload, about how to make sure that we can retain and recruit teachers.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in extra funding to boost NHS frontline capability. Steve Barclay says the government will work to bring response times back to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances and expanding urgent care to take people into their homes for medical attention. Mr Barclay also says the government will publish the number of 12-hour wait lists. Labour says the plans aren't enough, though, to tackle the problems in the NHS. Now, the Prime Minister has today been defending his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi tax row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about Zahawi's tax affairs. The Prime Minister, though, says he did sack the Conservative Party chairman yesterday, immediately after the ethics inquiry found there had been a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
And in international news, the US Secretary of State has called for an easing of tensions whilst he was on a visit to Jerusalem following a spike of violence in the region. On Friday, Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians, most of whom they say were gunmen. That's after a Palestinian man carried out a gun attack in East Jerusalem, killing 7. Anthony Blinken says it's everyone's responsibility to calm tensions rather than inflame them. Those are your latest news stories on GB News. You are up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Back now to Farage.
Good evening. I sat here last Monday and said to you there was no doubt in my mind that Zahawi would go, and that the longer it went on, the weaker Sunak would look. And then on Wednesday, I sat here and said Keir Starmer ran rings around the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's questions. It was absolutely obvious that Sunak had not been told the full truth. And yet we have to wait, and suddenly it's all a rush job in the end, where the head of ethics produces a report, and at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, Zahawi is sacked. Well, Rishi Sunak was in the north of England today. I'll tell you why in a moment, but here was how Sunak described the sacking.
Relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past. What you can hold me accountable for is, like, what did you do about it? What I did as soon as I knew about the situation was appoint somebody independent, looked at it, got the advice, and then acted pretty decisively to move on, because that's why.
He acted pretty decisively. Gosh, I wouldn't like to see him if he acted pretty indecisively. Look, if you're the boss of a big organisation, you suspect that a very senior figure has done wrong, and you've had months and months of speculation about what that may be, you don't palm it off to somebody else. You get a grip yourself as the boss and you make a decision. And Sunak simply didn't do that. All of it, of course, spoiled his big day up in the northeast of England, where he announces there'll be 800 new ambulances, 5,000 new hospital beds, and a new idea where you can be in hospital at home. Now, whether any of this actually works to reduce waiting lists, I have no idea. I'm certain of one thing: it will all cost yet more money, and certainly getting a grip on the NHS matters. But polling released this afternoon by the Conservative Home website, and that's there for Conservative Party members and activists, shows his popularity amongst his own party's fallen pretty sharply over the course of the last month. So, has Rishi got a grip? Let me know what you think. Farage at gbnews.uk. And I have to tell you, he might be intellectually very clever and perfectly polite and pleasant and all the rest of it, but I see the man very much as a follower and not as a leader. I don't believe he's got a grip. I think they're in far bigger trouble than they even realise themselves. Well, joining me, Dan Hodges, columnist on the Mail on Sunday. Chequers last week, a big jolly get-together. I mean, Zahawi was there.
Not entirely sure how jolly it was, but with the Dean there.
But interesting that Isaac Levido, the guru, trained by Linton Crosby, we're told, is briefing them, this could be like 1992 all over again, where John Major wasn't given a chance against Neil Kinnock, and then suddenly it all turned around. Are there parallels with 1992, in your opinion?
Well, if there are, I can't see them at the moment. I mean, you could say that both... I mean, the one parallel is Rishi Sunak has a touch of John Major about him, but I'm not entirely sure that's a positive. I mean, I think the most fascinating thing, though, in terms of the briefing in relation to the sort of the Isaac Levido presentation was it was being spun as Isaac Levido says we're still in the game, we've got a 20% chance of winning the next election. You can invert that, though. So if your election guru starts off the presentation by saying we've got an 80% chance of losing the next election, then that's not really, chance, there's, all right, looking at the glass half full or the glass half empty. I mean, you said you thought they were in, much more trouble than they think. I think most of them know precisely how much trouble they're in. I mean, I think, they're going to keep going, they're going to keep plodding along, they're going to play it along. But I think if you speak to cabinet ministers and MPs, there is just a feeling now that I'm starting to detect that, they're not quite given up, but they are starting to dust off the CVs and pick up the phone at the recruitment consultant.
And one or two have bolted for the door already.
One have bolted. We're going to see that. We're going to see that accelerating, I think, as we move through the year.
Yeah, and more scandals to come, or more potential scandals to come. We've got Dominic Raab, still under investigation, and hey, Boris Johnson also still facing, what could be an accusation from that committee that he lied to Parliament. And yet, Dan, it seemed over the weekend that there were cheerleaders out there again saying, well, Zahawi's gone, so Boris Johnson must become party chairman. I can't see Sunak doing that, can you?
I can't see Sunak doing that. I'm not entirely sure I can see Boris doing it if Boris was offered it. I think there is a job in government Boris has got his eye on, but I don't think it's party chairman. Boris is at the moment is sort of prioritising, his speaking engagements, his lucrative speaking engagements. Obviously, his sort of informal diplomacy with Ukraine. I can't really see him, calling Tom on that to start going around the country trying to work out how you get another couple.
It would also be very divisive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look. I mean, it's going to be divided. I mean, this is one of the problems Rishi Sunak has got strategically. Up until the local elections, I've already been doing it this year, myself and my colleagues, we're all going to be writing about what's Boris doing. Isn't he going to make his play? What are his allies doing? What are they saying? Are they plotting? To which the answer is yes, they are plotting, and yes, they will make their play. And so for Rishi Sunak, it's very, very difficult to get on the front foot when you've got this huge political beast sitting there who's cutting across what he's trying to do.
Now, your column yesterday, a fairly unique take on what's happening in the interaction between the government and the civil service.
Yeah, I mean, the civil service are now getting ready to wreak their revenge on the government. Part of it is it's going to be, in their view, payback for what they see as Dom Cummings' attack on the civil service, his civil service reforms, his I'm going to make sure a hard rain falls on the civil service, comment he and his allies deny them making. But it was reported, and the civil service see that as accurately reflecting what he was trying to do. So there's an element of that. There's also an element that obviously, we think of this government having been in for 13 years, and that being an incredibly long time. That's nothing in civil service years. I mean, civil service years are like sort of dog years or cat years or whatever. And a lot of the people who are senior civil servants now were obviously still relatively senior civil servants under the Blair-Brown administrations. So there are connections there, and a transition to Labour holds no fears for them.
And they also hate Brexit.
There's obviously culturally there is an intense dislike of Brexit. But the crucial thing is they've calculated we're going to have a change of government in the next month, by next year, and they're preparing for that.
I think they are. Now, what is fascinating, Dan, is we're talking about Sunak, Zahawi. We haven't talked much about the health ideas, but we kind of keep hearing that same stuff every year anyway. But on Wednesday, the 1st of February 2023, there will be strikes. Rail strikes, bus strikes, teaching strikes, university lecturer strikes, civil service strikes, and it's been announced today that at some point the firefighters, for the first time in 20 years, will come out on strike. We have not seen this number of people striking since 1978. How much of a problem is that for the government?
Well, it's a massive problem. It would be a problem anyway, obviously, in industrial action on this scale. But it's an added problem for a number of reasons. Firstly, because Rishi Sunak, at the turn of the year, was talking very tough. He was saying he was going to, I think, it was Operation, it was briefed to some newspapers, Operation Get Tough. Rishi Sunak was going to sort this out, minimum service guarantees, they were going to solve the problem. Obviously, as we can see, they won't. The government was calculating that public support would move away from the unions. That's not really happening.
In the case of the rail, it might have done.
In terms of the rail workers,
but there's still great sympathy for the nurses.
But you're not going to win a fight with the nurses on this sort of stuff. And the reality is, Rishi Sunak is pitching himself as, I'm the grown-up, I'm the great project manager, I'm the guy who's going to make all the problems go away. And as we can see, on the industrial front, the problems aren't going away, the chaos is getting worse. And politically, he just can't afford that. Never mind the fact the country can't afford it. Politically, he can't afford that. And he is going to have to, at some point in the very near future, bite on the bullet. He's going to have to certainly settle with the nurses and the other health workers, sort of ambulance drivers, etc., going to have to settle with firefighters and possibly try and split some of those unions off from, possibly the rail workers where there is a degree of less public support. But he's not going to be able to defeat the nurses, and he's going to have to recognise that.
Either way, it'll be a significant backing down from his position.
Yeah.
He hasn't really got a grip, has he?
No, he hasn't. Now, obviously, let's not forget the position he inherited, the chaos he inherited. But no, and it's as I said, his brand is, I'm the guy who will get a grip. I'm going to manage things. I'm not flashy, but in my understated way, I'm going to make the chaos. I'm going to be competent. I'm going to make the chaos go away. Fine.
Yeah.
But he hasn't,
No, Dan Hodges, thank you. And certainly, over Zahawi, I think he's been far from competent. In a moment, we're going to head to the north of England. We're going to have a look at a couple of companies who were encouraged to start natural gas exploration, only to see the government U-turn. Could they take legal action against the government? All of that in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, has Rishi got a grip? Some of your responses coming in. Twitter user says, struggling very hard to keep his grip on that big chair he's trying to sit in. He can't even get a grip on his own civil servants. Stuart says, as much grip as a limp wrist can give. And Sean says, Rishi might have woken up about it, but why did it take so long for him to get sacked? Look, I honestly, he's mishandled this Zahawi situation. The first big questions about this man were being asked in June of last year. And if HMRC come and speak to you, I think you are actually under investigation. And to deny that, to do it in the Commons, to do it on the media, you know, we all knew this over a week ago. No, he's acted in a very weak manner. Now, there are a plethora of organisations arguing for net zero. They have support from virtually all UK political parties, from many media organisations. There are one or two who are more sceptical about the agenda. One of them is Car 26, headed up by Lois Perry, and she's just been up to the north of England, where she interviewed Francis Egan, the CEO of Quadrilla, the company that goes out and explores for natural gas. Here's a short clip of that interview.
I read last year that you had been in talks with the other company in your space, Ineos, about potentially mounting a legal challenge based on the disruption that you guys had to the government. Is that something that you're still considering? I mean, did you lose money because of their decisions? Are you going to challenge the government on that?
Well, I can answer the one part of that question, and unfortunately I can't answer the other part.
Fair enough, that's fine.
But we have invested hundreds of millions of pounds following government policy. We have followed all the rules, we've complied with all the regulations.
Your eyes are doing a lot of talking at the moment.
And Ineos have done the same.
Yeah, I read something about a 1 billion war chest.
Ineos have put a lot of money into this in good faith.
Yeah.
I won't talk about the legality of it, but I will say we have been treated appallingly.
Okay.
We have been treated appallingly.
So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you might want.
Look, we would like
even
to move forward.
A sorry note. So would that be enough? No, probably not. No.
I mean, we weren't even
we
weren't even contacted between the first and second
it's
moratorium.
Disgusting, isn't
it? Nobody knew, certainly in our company, or I'm sure in the rest of the industry, that frankly, in response to a parliamentary question, the Prime Minister banned fracking again. I mean, what way is that to treat people who invested hundreds of millions of pounds
and the consumer
pursuing your policy?
Well, that was part of a much longer interview, which you can find on the Car 26 YouTube channel. Lois Perry joins me now. Francis Egan seemed pretty angry.
Yeah, he said that the government had had no communication with him in between Liz Truss lifting the moratorium and then it being taken off, put back into place 6 weeks later. And in fact, there was no proper announcement. It was just in response to a question in Parliament that suddenly it was put back into place. They've put hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds in investment in. You can't run a country like that. You can't run an energy system like that. He certainly can't run a company like that. So, yeah, he was upset. But you know what he's like. He was also upbeat and laughing as well. But...
And of course, Jim Ratcliffe, I mean, who is, I think, the richest Briton alive today, running INEOS. He's very much in the same position too.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what happens. He didn't definitely say they'd launch a legal action.
His eyes did a lot of talking, though, Nigel, didn't they?
No,
also, if you can't talk about something for legal reasons, then there's a legal reason for doing so. But I spent a lot of time in the north of England talking to all different types of people. Scott Benton MP, the Blackpool MP, also Lee Anderson. That's another rollicking interview that will be available over the next couple of weeks on the YouTube channel. He said quite a lot of exciting things.
And in terms of Joe Public, I mean, we've had at least 20 years of school children being told this is the biggest challenge that we face, and none of us want to be irresponsible about big challenges the world faces. But are the public becoming more sceptical about the net zero agenda?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some people just said, I think it's a load of nonsense. Other people just said, look, whether it's real or not, we don't care. We just want the government to think about us rather than ideology. People always think the government are out of touch, but at the moment, it's extraordinary.
And do we have any... I mean, you've got those stories. You've been on the streets of the north of England talking to people.
Yeah, it was great, actually.
Do we have any polling data on this?
Yeah, we do. So the year before last, when COP26 happened, there was 58% of those who expressed an opinion in the Car26 YouGov poll said that they wanted a referendum on net zero. You don't normally want a referendum unless you are going against the status quo. But we did it a few months ago. YouGov has gone up to 62% of those expressing an opinion. That's very high. People are extremely sceptical. I talked to Francis Egan about Blackpool because obviously they would have benefited very, very much from the fracking. And he said that the people would have either had free energy or low-cost energy, or at the very least they would have been supported. And of course, the energy costs would have come down for all of us. The argument about there being a set price for gas, he told me, was absolute nonsense. But one of the people that I spoke to at a food kitchen that I went to that provides meals for people, not just homeless people, but people who have made the choice. They've heated their homes, so they've eaten there. You know, there was a girl 2 weeks ago, a 19-year-old girl, had a baby. The electric meter was about to run out. She went and worked as a street prostitute.
Yeah, I mean, the electric meters. There's so much to this. Lois, thank you very much indeed. Well, interesting. They were really potentially fighting words there that we saw from Francis Egan. And, of course, we can't speak for where Jim Ratcliffe is on this. But it is true you can't actually have a coherent energy policy without long-term thinking and planning. And, gosh, Laurie Laybourne, environmental policy researcher, we are all over the place on energy, aren't we?
So I think the point that he was making in that interview about how businesses are frustrated, how government is changing policy sometimes and so on, I think that's a bit of a fair point, to be honest. You need to have policy certainty to make big investment decisions, particularly around energy. And the track record of the Conservatives in government is not very reliable when it comes to that certainty.
No, I can never work out whether we are doing nuclear energy or whether we're not. I mean, it's all over the place. I think one of the points that perhaps is expressed by those polls that Lois is talking about. Now, look, if you ask people, would you like to have a say? A lot of people will say, we'd like to have a say, and I get that. But there has been a growing scepticism about the cost of net zero policies. But isn't the absolute truth of it here, Laurie, that like it or not, we will be using fossil fuels in some way for many decades to come?
Yeah, and that's the concept of net zero, has the net bit, which admits that, there will probably be some type of fossil fuel use, but it will be cancelled out by certain technologies or planting more trees, the things that suck carbon down. One of the issues here, though, that wasn't touched on in that interview was that we're not necessarily talking about opinion polls or whatever when it comes to fracking. We're talking about markets, and you can't really buck the fact that the UK has a liberal gas market, and if people got frack gas out the ground, which there are so many complexities about why that's very hard, they will sell it to the highest bidder. Quadrilla's not interested in British energy security necessarily. It's interested in making money from gas.
Well, of course, they are a private company, and I get that. INEOS are too, and I fully understand that. However, you know, if you have an initiative with government, there are ways that we could produce better pricing. After all, you know, American consumers do not buy gas at world market prices. So I think there may be ways around this. But here's the real nub of it for me. There are many, many, many on the global warming side of the argument, on the net zero side of the argument. There are Just Stop Oil protests, Extinction Rebellion. And there seems to be this sort of, we must not have any more fresh investment in oil, gas or coal exploration, as if we're happy to import the stuff. If we're going to need to use fossil fuels, isn't the point we ought to produce it ourselves?
No, because we should be investing in the things that secure British energy supply and things like fracked gas. You go back to your point about America. We are not America. The ability for America to frack vast amounts of gas, which was a huge moment. It's like a world historic moment that America managed to get this gas supply, and it altered the global energy situation. America suddenly became a huge exporter. Britain has a different geology to the US. It's not the size of the US.
But we still have
decades investing in it.
But we still have potentially very big gas reserves. We still have huge coal reserves, though we don't use vast amounts of it. We still need it in steel and other things, and we're still using oil. I repeat the question. If, as most experts think, we're going to be using fossil fuels for 3, 4, 5 decades to come, should we not produce those fossil fuels here in the United Kingdom?
Maybe some of them, but that's a small residual. We're talking about fracking and Quadrilla and, you know, spending huge amounts of money on trying to get fracked gas out of the UK. That's not a credible strategy. The idea that the UK... Well, let's look at the UK's energy mix at the moment. It has a huge advantage in offshore wind and things, right? It could have had a huge advantage in the batteries that we're going to need to power electric vehicles, but that was messed up by the government. So
I mean, wind's all well and good, but it's intermittent and it's jolly expensive.
But batteries will help us with that. Just because we are not... You know, halfway through the process of transitioning to coal in the Victorian times, people weren't sitting around and being like, no, it's too expensive, we've only found this amount of coal. It requires that process of innovation and investment to transition to a better energy system. And we will get there.
If these private companies want to try and extract gas and they're taking their own financial risk, I'm happy for them to do it. But, Laurie, thank you for coming in, putting that point of view. In a moment, are the British forces fit for purpose? Because a US general has cast doubt upon it.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9. It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Ukraine war and defence very much in the news today. Here's a clip from Boris Johnson in a documentary about that war. This is what he had to say.
He threatened me at one point and said, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would only take a minute or something like that, jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was taking, the sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have, he was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate.
Well, it's typical Boris Johnson, isn't it? He sort of said and something like that, and it's all a little bit vague. Well, the newspapers went with it in a big way today. The Kremlin have denied it completely. I've no idea as to the truth of it. But perhaps what is more relevant is the US general warning the British Army, warning us as a country, we're no longer regarded as a top-level fighting force. And indeed, Conservative Member of Parliament Tobias Ellwood, Conservative Chair of the Defence Committee, said he is very concerned. Rishi Sunak, in response, said, oh, absolutely, we're still a top-level fighting force. Well, the defence editor and veteran commentator on these things, Con Coughlin from the Daily Telegraph, joins me down the line now. Con, if I put you up against a wall and ask you, do we still have top-level fighting forces, in your opinion?
We have some elements that are top-level, but looking at it in the round, Nigel, the US Army General is quite correct. And US Army generals have been saying to me for a decade or more that we are losing our warfighting capability. I mean, the basic requirements of the British Army to be a top-level fighting force is to have the ability to deploy and sustain a war-fighting division. At the moment, we would struggle to get a brigade out the door. And if we got a brigade out the door, which is about half the strength of a division, we'd be able to sustain it for a few weeks, but not long-term. So the prospect of doing the kind of missions we did in Iraq and Afghanistan recently are just nigh on impossible. And frankly, I think this has been a deliberate policy by successive Conservative governments since 2010. Basically, if we don't have an army big enough to deploy it, then we can't deploy it. And so that keeps us out of getting involved in controversial wars.
Well, yeah, I mean, that may be a popular point with some people that we're not involved, but there is also the question of, vital national defence in time of crisis. And I mean, there are some that say we have actually spent some quite good money modernising the Navy and the Air Force, but it's actually the Army that's the problem. Is that your view?
The Army is a big problem, but I think the Navy is struggling with the number of combat ships. The RAF is struggling with the number of fighter jets, and, defending our skies and protecting our shores is a fundamental duty of the government. And I'm always reminded of that old adage that, we don't choose wars, wars choose us. And very few people predicted the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the scale that's been conducted. And we now find ourselves helping to defend Ukraine. And just by sending 14 Challenger tanks to Ukraine has depleted our fighting forces, our army fighting forces, such a level that we could barely muster a couple of squadrons of our own tanks if we were required to do so. And when you look back, a couple of decades ago, we had 300 tanks or so available. Now we've got, the last time I looked, it was about between 40 and 50, although the MOD quibble with these figures. But if you wanted to get tanks operational tomorrow, if we could lay our hands on 40, I'd be very surprised.
Wow. Con Coughlin, on that depressing note, thank you for joining us here and telling us the truth. Very depressing, but thank you. Well, there you are. That's what happens in year 13 of a Conservative government who've run our forces down in the most shameful way. Couple of quick thoughts. What the Farage moment? Not only are we spending £6 billion a year on hotel rooms for those that cross the English Channel, but we've now learnt the Aspin cards, the debit cards that they're given. So they're staying in 4-star hotels and they're now spending £160 million a year on that. And a bit of joy, just a little bit of joy. Why not? This time last year, Novak Djokovic was under house arrest in Melbourne. And I went to Belgrade and I went to the family trophy room, and you can see this clip of me wandering in.
This is pretty amazing. Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome to the party.
It was all very lively and very jolly and very sociable. But I was there because I wanted to lend my support to Djokovic, to the Djokovic family. Well, this year he wasn't under house arrest. And of course, he's now won his 10th Australian Open, his 22nd Grand Slam, and he'll go on and win more this year, I am sure. Well done, Novak. You are a real star. In a moment, Talking Pints with Andrew Loveday. He is a British film producer behind a real cult hit.
Coming up on Damn Watson tonight, is it time for Prince Andrew to fight to clear his name? Jeffrey Epstein lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who was wrongly smeared by Virginia Giuffre, makes the case for the disgraced Duke's redemption live. Plus, should the Archbishop of Canterbury broker a peace deal for Prince Harry to attend the coronation? Top royal experts debate that in The Clash. And Neil Oliver attacks the government's dystopian nudge and truth units that are threatening our democracy. That's Damn Watson tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, only on GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's that time of the day. Yes, it's Talking Pints. I'm joined by English film producer Andrew Loveday. Andrew, welcome to the programme.
Nice to meet you, Nigel.
Good to meet you.
Cheers.
Now, it all starts off on that unique place, Canvey Island. That's where you're raised, and that's where you start painting, decorating, and doing a variety of things.
Yeah, I mean, I started way back in... Well, I was born in Dartford and I came to Canvey Island. My parents moved me out there many, many years ago. Went to school there, didn't do very well. And then left school there, ended up working with my father and my brother in the building industry. And then, lo and behold, as if by magic, I get a job in a film company.
How?
I was painting an office in Shoreditch, Taxi City. And there's a guy there, and he said to me, "You are wasted doing this. Why don't you come work for me?" And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" He said, "I sell dreams." So, and that was the start of it.
And that was enough.
That was the start of it. And then I worked for the company, and then 2-3 years later, myself, my father, and my cousin, we set up our own company called Carnaby Films.
Yeah. And what on earth made you think, as somebody still very new in the industry, that you could succeed with this?
Well, we didn't. We muddled through it. Our first film, which was a film called Lighthouse Hill, we made. It was so bad that we had a big premiere in Leicester Square, and we said, "What we're going to do?" Because once everyone sees this film, they're going to hang us. And there's only one of the guys in the office said, "Look, my mother knows Princess Michael of Kent. Get her along. She might take, the edge off it." So she comes, wins the flags, Leicester Square. Film finishes. It's like tumbleweed. Everyone's like, we're sinking and think, "Oh my God!" And she gets up and she goes, "Bravo, bravo!" And all the investors got up and said, "Bravo!" And then it went from there. And then we went off and we made another film called Spivs with Ken Stott and Nick Moran and Kate Ashfield, and then went on to make a World War II film with Billy Zane and Alexander Skarsgård. And Spivs, our first film, we gave Rita Ora her very first ever job in film as a young girl.
You've made a lot of films.
43 movies, yeah.
But one real cult hit, Rise of the Foot Soldier, and you're now on film number 6, I think you said earlier.
Film number 6, yeah. We're editing it as we speak now.
And it's a docudrama, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's based on these characters that were the real in life, and then these guys end up tragically getting killed in Readiness back in 1995. And after the first 2 movies, there was such an appetite for the brand and the stories. We then took a licence to then start taking these characters and moving them on another journey within the period before their deaths, of some fact, some fiction. Obviously, we're making, we've got to entertain people. And that's when we went off and started making the films, and they kept becoming bigger and bigger, and more successful and more successful.
And now a cult following, basically.
A cult following, yeah.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But, you see, I mean, we think of Hollywood and the big money and the big rah-rah. The English British film industry is a tiddler by comparison, but it's got a very loyal following, hasn't it?
Very loyal following, especially in the British independent side. You know, because a lot of films that you see that get made here in England, they're made from American companies or studios. So to have an independent film, I mean, it's so hard to make a film for under £1 million.
Yeah.
You know, it's ridiculously hard because obviously you can't get the talent, you can't pay for the talent. So you've got to try and make a film that's going to strike in the public, that's something they want to see.
Well, it's certainly... We just showed a few shots, and by the way, if anyone didn't like the violence, we're sorry. But it's... yeah. But it's that cult follower, it's that repeat buyer thing that's really important for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a repeat buyer thing, and I think what it is we go right way back to why there is such a great following on this genre, is if you go right back to the craze films.
Well, this is what fascinates me. What is it about us, or lots of us? We seem to love the whole underworld. We almost see gangsters and criminals as being quite attractive people.
Yeah, I mean, it's glamour. You know, I mean, the modern day villain today is not glamorous, right?
Right. Well, Ronnie and Reggie, glamorous.
Of course they were glamorous. I mean, they surrounded by... Look, there's one thing you can't do, no matter how much money you've got, no matter how much notoriety you've got, and how much of a violent criminal you are, what you can't buy and can't get is fame.
Mm-hmm.
So what they would do back in the 60s, and a lot of these criminals would associate themselves with fame. One, to legitimise themselves and their businesses, and the fame and the glamour was associated with the criminal underworld. And that's why it became this very, very sexy story and very, something that people look and aspire to and go, wow, what the days of that 60s London, you know, going out with these guys in the casinos and you know, the Jags and that. It was glamorous.
And yet the truth is, I mean, for all the glamour that people see in the craze, they could be pretty nasty, couldn't they?
Oh, of course, exactly, yeah. I mean, they used the glamour to hide their criminal background. But I mean, that's why I think there's the attraction to a lot of these British old school gangster films of that sort of genre is the glamour.
I think it's really interesting. Now, you are, Andrew, you've got more films coming out, you're busy as hell.
Yeah.
I can tell, but a whole new departure for you, and this is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the world of film has been around 120 years, or whatever it is, and of course now it's not just in the cinema, it's you're streaming, of course, on the platform. Which is best for you, the streaming or the cinema?
Well, the streaming has become the new DVD.
Yeah.
Because DVD's dead.
Yeah.
So the new streamers come in, and there's a new streamers popping up all the time. Now, Paramount, Lionsgate. So they become the new... so if Netflix buy your film, 18 months later they don't want it, Paramount will buy it, because everyone wants to see it on their platform. So it becomes the new DVD format.
Yeah.
Cinema is a very big risk, because if you get it wrong, you have to spend lots of money, and you only get a small percentage of the cinema take-ins. So if you spend £1 million on a cinema prints and advertising, if you get your money back, cinema takes 70% of that. So it's a big risk. But you need the cinema for the shop window to be able to go to Netflix or to Amazon and go, it's been at the cinema.
So it all kind of works together, really?
It all works together. It's a lost leader. You know, it's been at the cinema, so this is why you've got to give us this big number.
Yeah.
So
tell me,
it's a business.
Have you made good money out of all this?
We've done very, very well out of it, yeah. Our investors have done very well out of it. Some films you win, some films you lose. But we structure all of our investments through the government-backed scheme of the EIS.
EIS, yeah, which is actually one of the few good things the government's done, to allow people to put venture capital with some big tax breaks.
Well, it funds the economy.
Yeah.
It gets people, rather than putting the money in their savings, give it a go, invest in this new company. If it works, great, you can get tax-free dividends for success. If it doesn't, we'll let you offset it the following year.
It's a terrific scheme.
It's a brilliant scheme.
Yeah, no, I often criticise the government on this programme, but I think that's something they've got absolutely right.
Scheme.
But you're about to go into a whole new world, the world of gaming.
Gaming, yeah.
Which is just humongous in size. Even takes people's lives over, which may not be a good thing. Tell us what you're up to.
So what we've done now, we've set up an old retro arcade version of like a Streets of Rage type game, and we've turned it into Rise of the Foot Soldier, the mobile game. And so you can play Pat, Tony or Craig, Rolf. Within the game, you can choose different levels, easy, and you go through this journey of 6 or 7 worlds. And it's a game for mobile apps. It will start there. We will test the market with that. And if the game's successful, we'll go on to do some more levels. But the great thing about it, we're going to get a new audience that never received or ever seen Foot Soldier before.
So you can sit there on the train and play the game.
Oh yeah, and it's marketed to our audience, which is white van man, guys in their 35s, 40s, come from the 90s, and love that sort of genre and love the films, and they go, wow, I can play this on my mobile phone on the train or sit in the traffic.
No, don't encourage that. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so that's the thought behind it, and who knows, if it gets successful, it could be a PlayStation, it could be a new Grand Theft Auto, Rise of the Foot Soldier.
You're giving it a go. More films to come.
More films to come. The next one will be out in October, and we've got a big premiere tomorrow night for re-releasing the very first film, which was 16 years ago. We made that film. That's being released tomorrow night, and it's going to be out across the whole country again, available on Sky and all, across all different platforms and at the cinema, so you can watch it all go back to where it started again in 2006 and 2007.
Andrew, well done.
Nigel, good to see you.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I've got a few seconds left. And, of course, you send me in your barrage the Farages. So here we go. Gordon asks me, do you think that Putin is laughing at Britain because of all the strikes that we are having? Well, I don't know. I think there are probably, to be honest, lots of reasons to laugh at Britain at the moment. We're not exactly standing very tall in the world order. I wouldn't think Putin's got time to laugh at Britain. I think he's far too busily engaged in a war that is costing the lives of tens of thousands of his young men. And actually, it's quite a sobering thought. I watched that film the other week, All Quiet on the Western Front. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant film. Yeah. I mean, harrowing, but brilliant. And I thought to myself, watching it, gosh, there are too many young men actually going through that experience right now in trenches, in cold weather, in Ukraine. And it's really, really horrible. Mary says, is Scotland a woke stronghold with Sturgeon in charge? Well, I'm so pleased that we covered that case quite heavily last week here. You know the one I mean. The guy rapes 2 women, then claims to be a woman, gets convicted, but is going to go into a woman's prison. There's been another one since then. Sturgeon has had to U-turn on all of it. Her reputation is dust, and we're beginning to learn we'll be tolerant of all people. Of course we will. But actually, women's rights are something that were fought for and championed, and they should not be endangered by men like this. Common sense is beginning to win. Now, last Thursday, I was in Crawley with a live audience, a Farage at large audience, because we had Katie Price there. We had the local football club trying to help them raise money for their new 3G pitch. We're going to Luton Thursday week. I'd already announced it, and it was full. We're moving venues to a bigger venue. You want to join me in Luton for a Farage at large on Thursday week, then please go to gbnews.uk. Thank you very much. I'm back with you at exactly the same time, 7 o'clock tomorrow night, but I'm now going to hand you over to Mark Dolan.
Nigel, cracking show. A very busy programme tonight. Are speed limits in this country now too slow? Also, is a Labour government now inevitable? What does that mean for you and me? We will ask top historian Dr. David Starkey. Plus, the mother of all comebacks is on the cards. Donald Trump's lawyer is live. See you shortly.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. A band of rain is moving south over the next 24 hours with showers following, and for northern parts of the UK, the winds are really picking up. An area of low pressure at the moment is affecting our weather. That's pushing into Iceland, so it's quite far from the UK, but it is dangling a number of weather fronts in from the north, and those fronts are, through the evening, sending some wet weather into Scotland, Northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. The rain pepping up for a time as it pushes south during the late evening and early hours of Tuesday, but by the time it pushes into central areas, it is starting to ease again. And to the south, clear spells with, in some spots, a touch of frost first thing, but otherwise 4 or 5 Celsius. To the north of the front, actually increasingly windy with showers into Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Now, the rain in the south really peters out during the morning and clears away by lunchtime, so not much to that. And then sunny spells returning with highs of 11 or 12 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 5 to 8 degrees with a strengthening wind. Cold enough for some snow above 400 metres across central and northern Scotland. And for central and northern Scotland, it turns even windier on Tuesday night with the risk of gales and 60 or 70 mile/hour wind gusts across exposed coasts of northern Scotland, especially Orkney, north of the mainland and Lewis. Risk of disruption from those winds. But there'll also be showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England through the night. Drier and clearer further south, but enough of a breeze to prevent a frost. And then a bright day on Wednesday in the south, whilst Northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland sees persistent rain at times. And in the far north of Scotland, after that very windy start to the day, the winds do ease and the showers become fewer and further between. Some sunshine reappearing. Cloudier skies for all of us on Thursday and Friday, but milder.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio
with the GB News